All right, let's dive into something pretty fascinating and, honestly, a little counterintuitive. We're going to explore the psychological journey of a relationship that doesn't start with choice, but with compulsion. It's an incredible story of how the human mind can adapt, reevaluate, and sometimes find a real connection in the most unlikely of circumstances.
And that brings us to the big question, doesn't it? Can a bond that's forced on two people ever genuinely transform into one they actually choose for themselves? It's a huge question. And believe me, the answer is a whole lot more complex than you might think.
Okay, so let's set the stage. Our story kicks off with a relationship that's really just a strategic move. Think of a forced marriage designed to put an end to a conflict. This has nothing to do with love or attraction. It's a transaction. It's a move on a chessboard, plain and simple.
So in this first phase, the dynamic is incredibly clear and, well, pretty cold. It's all defined by a power structure on one side and a heavy sense of obligation on the other. You can just feel the emotional distance here. It's a purely functional arrangement. And this is absolutely crucial to understand at the start. They are not two individuals connecting. Not at all. They are simply filling roles. You've got the enforcer and the one who is obligated, the victor and the pawn. The actual person behind that title, completely invisible.
But what happens when you force two people to be around each other day in and day out? Well, things rarely stay so black and white. And this, right here, is where the story gets really interesting. The walls start to crumble. A pretty profound psychological shift begins to happen, all because of their shared, intense environment.
Now, what's so wild is how our brains are wired. See, when we are in these kinds of restricted situations, our mind instinctively just tries to make sense of everything. It's constantly looking for patterns, searching for meaning, and that process, slowly but surely, starts to change how we see things.
So at first, the relationship is totally defined by what we call dehumanization. One person looks at the other and just sees a role, a tool in some larger strategy. There's no humanity there, only function.
But then, the shift begins. Through something as simple as quiet observation, noticing their caution, their guarded behavior, maybe those little flickers of emotion, rehumanization starts to kick in. The role begins to dissolve, and you start to see an actual person underneath it all. And this is how those first, really fragile seeds of trust get planted. It starts with tiny things, a brief, personal detail shared, a moment where that super-controlled communication gives way to something real, something honest. And, critically, one person starts to realize that the other's actions are driven by a need to survive, not just a desire for power. All right, let's get into the next phase, which is, without a doubt, the absolute heart of this whole transformation, the journey from obligation to choice. This is where everything starts to change on a fundamental level. And from a psychological standpoint, this is just fascinating. This growing feeling of attachment, it isn't a conscious decision. It's a natural byproduct of the environment. It's kind of like the mere exposure effect, where just being around something or someone makes you feel more of an affinity for them. It's the result of all that repeated exposure, the shared stress, and this new mutual recognition that, hey, you're a person. This slide lays out the core shift perfectly. We're moving from a state of mujburi, or obligation, where everything you do is dictated by your circumstances, to marzi, or choice, where your actions are finally driven by your own personal will. This is the pivot. And then, it happens. The turning point. It's that one single moment, usually when some external conflict gets really intense, where the stakes become deeply personal, and one person makes a voluntary decision, a real choice to take a risk for the other. That one act just shatters the old transactional framework for good.
So, what comes after a massive turning point like that? You get a new bond. The relationship is basically rebuilt from the ground up on a completely different foundation, a truly relational one, totally independent of how this whole thing started.
The connection isn't about survival anymore. It's not about strategy. It takes on a brand new identity, one that's now built on a foundation of real, mutual understanding, and the shared experience of that incredible transformation they went through together. So when you zoom out, what does a story like this actually teach us about human connection itself? Let's take a look at the big lessons. I think it boils down to three really powerful takeaways. First, human connection is just incredibly unpredictable. You just never know. Second, that being in extreme environments can totally reshape our emotional responses. And third, and this is a big one, relationships aren't always born from a conscious, deliberate choice.
So here it is, the entire progression laid out in 5 clear steps. It all starts with forced proximity. That leads to observation. Observation then builds understanding, which fosters attachment. And finally, that attachment is what paves the way for a truly voluntary connection. It's a really powerful and, honestly, a very believable framework.
So we end up right back where we started, but now with an even deeper question. If our connections can be so profoundly shaped by the environments we are thrown into, then what really is the true meaning of choice when it comes to our relationships? It's something to think about, isn't it?